First and foremost, we'll get into some Liberal problems. We have the Minister of Immigration, Mark Miller, admitting that Parliament was prorogued for political reasons, for the Prime Minister to be able to choose a new leader after he both simultaneously prorogued our Parliament, which basically brought everything, all parliamentary business, to a standstill, to a complete halt. And he also resigned as Liberal Party leader. So until they can choose a new leader, we are basically governmentless here in Canada. And Mark Miller just confirmed that for us.
The Parliament's been prorogued because of the sclerosis that has occurred inside Parliament for the last 6 months, but also for the transition to a new Prime Minister, to a new leader of the Liberal Party. So the Parliament's been prorogued because of the sclerosis that has occurred.
Yeah, I don't think that is why Parliament should be prorogued. The fact that the Governor General, Mary Simons, gave the go-ahead for Trudeau to prorogue Parliament in such an uneasy time and landscape, as I've kind of already mentioned, is insane to me. But for them to come out and just now all of a sudden blatantly confirm and that this was it's basically to buy them time. It's to buy the Liberal Party time to choose a new leader. So they're not really concerned about, our democracy and the fact that we are facing a tariff war with the United States, our largest and closest trade ally and partner. No, this is so that it can buy the Liberals some time to choose a new leader as they engage in leadership campaigns instead of focusing on what is in the best and healthiest interest of Canadians and our economy.
Exactly. The absolute worst timing when Canada needs leadership the most. What are they doing? This. Not only that, we know that Canadians want an election and they want it now. I just shared a poll that just came out, I think it was yesterday, that shows that 77%, who they're voting for, they're saying we need leadership now. We can't have you guys going back and forth. Get this organized so we can figure out whether they want to work with the U.S. or I suppose some want to fight the U.S. in this economic trade war. But 77% of Canadians are in agreement that we need an election now. And they're just like, yeah, for the new Prime Minister. It's like, no, it should be an election yesterday.
Yeah. Call an election. And we'll get to that in a few minutes, how Alexa tried to point that very specific and pointed question to Trudeau and was subsequently, we'll get to it. But first, I want to highlight the leader of the opposition, the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, who is basically calling Trudeau, he's calling Trudeau a loon. He says he's the biggest loon in the Liberal government. And don't take it from me. Here's his own words.
So what's the Liberal game plan to try and save their government in the next election? Here's what it is. They're going to pretend that they've changed completely, that they've elected a new leader who's back to normal. And they're going to put in someone like Mark Carney, and they'll pretend he's different because he looks different, right? He knows, unlike Justin, he knows how to comb his hair, and he wears normal navy blue socks and a nice suit, and he pretends to have had a corporate job. So they say this guy's a complete change. He's back to normal. He knows how to work a calculator. Make no mistake, this guy is just as, if not more, radical than Justin Trudeau. And today, we got the proof. You'll never guess who's announced he's supporting Carney. The most crazy, self-described socialist in the government, Stephen Guilbeault, the crazy carbon tax minister. This is a guy who has been arrested twice, once for climbing on the roof of the Premier of Alberta to protest against the energy sector, the second time for climbing the CN Tower. He wants to ban road building, nuclear power, wants to shut down the forestry sector because he says that's the only way to save the caribou. He's against hydroelectric dams, and most important of all, he said he would resign from the Trudeau cabinet if there was even one more exemption from the carbon tax. He wants the carbon tax to apply on all fossil fuel energy, and has said he would end his career if it did not go ahead. Now, this is important because it means that if Carney were not privately committing to him behind the scenes that he will keep the carbon tax, then Guilbeault would not be supporting him. Obviously, they have a carbon tax compact to keep and increase the tax because Guilbeault wants the tax to be 5, 6, 7, or 8 times higher. He wants to ban all fossil fuel jobs now. He is the most radical and fanatical of the Trudeau ministers, a guy who calls himself a socialist, and he's with Mark Carney. That's not because Carney is a normal, old-fashioned liberal. Far from it. Carney is just like Justin, just as radical. Don't be fooled. We don't need a guy who's the same as Trudeau but can comb his hair. We need a total change. Fire these guys. Bring home common sense conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, and put Canada first. Let's bring it home.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack out of that, but balancing the budget. I mean, we haven't had a balanced budget since the Liberals came to power in 2015. And
it will balance itself.
Yeah, as Trudeau infamously said, right? Instead of balancing or even closely resembling a balanced budget, we've instead seen former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who's now vying for leadership of the Liberal Party, actually break her own budgetary predictions to the tune of billions of dollars. That's just grotesque government overspending. It is absolutely insane. And now with the tariff threat from the United States and the now President Donald Trump, 25% incoming on February the 1st. And that's only 2 months before our carbon tax is set to be increased once again on April the 1st. It's not an April Fool's Day joke, as many of us had hoped in the first couple years of the annual hike. But so Canadians are really taking it from every which way and being taxed from every which way. And I don't know how much more any regular Canadian can handle it. So Pierre Poilievre coming on and speaking that common sense, vowing to axe the tax, bring home common sense, restore government accountability. I mean, it sounds great. And if he follows through on it, I think the tide has turned and is continuing to turn, that Canadians want to see more of that as they are hit hardest in their pocketbooks. And there's really no safe space for Canadians, right? The Liberals always talk about, safe spaces. But when you're trying to escape the heavy hand of a tyrannical government who is taxing you endlessly without fair and accurate or adequate representation, especially now when we don't even have any parliament function. So we're not being represented at all in parliament.
Yeah. What are we paying for?
Exactly. Are we really getting more bang for our buck? And meanwhile, you have Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, who seems to be the only rational leader trying to work democratically and work alongside the US government to rein in some of these threats and work for the best interest of Albertans. And I'm just sad that she's not representing, more of us, Canada, more broadly on a larger scale.
Yeah, I was born in Alberta, so I'm very sticking to that now. I'm so proud. I've been in BC forever, but now I'm like, you know what? I'm Albertan. But yeah, Poilievre spit a lot of facts there. I mean, Carney is the same liberal wolf. Maybe some are not seeing past the sheep's clothing. But another thing I noticed out of what he said there is what he's warning people. Like, there is no difference. This is the Liberals. You have, of all people, Guilbeault supporting him. So nothing has changed. And it reminds me a little bit of what we just saw ahead of the US election, where, I mean, we've been joking about Biden and how unfit he's been, falling all over the place, air handshaking nobody. We've been talking about that for years. Even Saudi Arabia was making fun of it on their comedian channels years ago. What did they do before the election? All of a sudden they noticed that Biden doesn't seem to be doing well, and they sort of warm you up to Harris coming in. And there was that fear for many, is that going to be enough? Even though Harris has been the VP this whole time, is that going to make people say the problem is solved? And I feel like we saw that a little bit with Trudeau. I mean, it's that whole boiling the frog slowly. Before, if you said F Trudeau, you were a far right extremist conspiracy theorists. But then there was that period where there's all the news coverage saying, Trudeau's own people don't want him. And then people start to go, okay, well, he's the problem. Then they get rid of him. and they have this shiny new coin, this Carney. And so I think that video is important, whether people are digesting it or not, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Especially as Premier Smith puts it point blank, these issues fall 100%, she said, at the feet and the hands of Justin Trudeau. They have harmed our relationship with our closest neighbor and ally. And we'll hear, these are Smith's remarks, and we'll come back and comment.
If there's a failure, the failure lands at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who damaged the relationship with the incoming president by his antics in the first round of negotiations. The frustration that I have reading Robert Lighthizer book, where he goes through and talks about the ways in which Canada messed around and came late to the table and tried to counter with Mexico and ghosted them, it damaged the relationship. Let's be super clear about why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in today. It lands 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who even just a few weeks ago gave a speech where he thought it was an affront to women that Kamala Harris didn't win. We're in a trade negotiation with a brand new administration, and we have a prime minister who keeps on poking his finger in the eye of the current administration and has damaged that relationship. So if there's a failure, it lands at his feet, which is why I'm counting down the days to when he's gone and we can have a reset. It's 47 days to go, and I hope he doesn't continue torching the relationship in the meantime. All I can do is try to repair and build relationships that should have been repaired and built over the last 4 years. That is what we do by having our office in Washington. We have good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, because that is what diplomacy is. You have to be able to work with both Democrats and Republicans, and you have to refrain from expressing a preference for who you would like in the White House. And so if there's a failure of leadership, and if there's a damage to the relationship, it's 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, absolutely. And as they claim this Team Canada approach, it's like, but Canadians want you to clean up the borders and they want you to get fentanyl off of the streets. I mean, we've been saying that for years, and now all of a sudden we're faced with a threat from an outside elected entity. President Donald Trump is now saying, clean up your borders and clean up your streets, or else I'm imposing a 25% tariff. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we better scramble and take some action. But instead of actually taking that action, which Canadians have been asking for the last few years, we're going to counter threaten and escalate those tensions with counter tariffs. It's just absolutely bizarro, upside down world. I think that the way that Premier Smith is going, by having that dialogue and being open to conversations and negotiations, being diplomatic, right? That's what it comes down to. The diplomacy of Danielle Smith, I think, is the right avenue to take in this time, and being hot-headed and countering with these threats like Doug Ford's doing, Justin Trudeau's doing. I know we'll get into it in a few minutes, but even BC Premier Eby is doing. I don't think that is the right way to rein this in. It's only going to escalate it further.
It is. And something else Smith said in another, I think it was actually the same, video there, but another clip, she says that she fears that this is going to be used as sort of an election, chip for them to use this for votes and politicize the whole thing even more than it already is. And I think that's already what's happening. And I think that's what's happening with our premiers. They're buddying up in some ways with the Liberal Party in their stance, rather than doing what's best for their citizens. Again, I'll throw to David Eby, which we're going to talk about in a minute there. So I'm very proud of Danielle Smith. I'm thankful we have someone like that on the international stage. She was at the inauguration. I heard Trudeau didn't get an invitation, obviously. But it's nice to have her there, and I wish it would rub off more on the rest of our premiers. Again, the common sense, I know that's the conservative sort of slogan, but that's all it really is just common sense.
Yeah, you don't have to be some sort of trained political science major to see that this might not end in anyone's favor if you keep escalating these kinds of tensions.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page.